Oh my god. I don't even have anything snarky to say. Just roll the intro. Curtis Eugene Cross, aka Black Milk, has officially released his 8th album, The Fever, under the label Mass Appeal. And surprisingly, not a lot of hype was built around this thing, partially since he didn't really tease it that much. He only released a music video the day before, and a studio session from his YouTube page. But it's also because of his fading relevance in the music industry, which is just natural. I mean, at this point, Black Milk has consistently made music for over a decade. So to continue having hype and an active fanbase, you'd have to have a pretty consistent discography, something I think Black Milk lacks. A lot of his work can feel very hit or miss, and I think a lot of that has to do with his producing skills being a lot better than his skills as an MC. This is painfully clear if you look at some of his produced albums, like Black and Brown. This album was absolutely fantastic. Every beat was just quirky, fun, and experimental, and they just fit so perfectly with Danny Brown's rapping. Compare this to his 2010 release, Album of the Year, and the weak link is quite easily found. I can't even explain his rapping, it just feels so uncomfortable and unsure of itself. And this is just a theme across of a lot of Black Milk albums. It's almost to a point where I think the beats are way too eccentric and creative to kind of have Black Milk's low-key and normal voice over them, which is why experimental beats work so well with people like Danny Brown. I think this is highly a reason why his older stuff has not really clicked with me, like Glitches in the Break or No Poison, No Paradise. But it's also why his oldest stuff from 2005, Sound of the City, goes so hard. The beats and the rapping are just on the same level, so it just completely grooves with each other. Here's an example of the second track, called What. This entire album was way more fun because of how relaxed it sounded. It was like a musician just trying to have fun and create music, other than some of his worst albums in my opinion that could feel a bit forced, and him trying to come up with the most clever bars and whatnot.
What is that? Oh shit, what is that?
All of this brings me to his newest album, The Fever. This album's just straight up fantastic. Whether it's how low-key and beautiful it sounds or how politically charged it is. Probably the best example of that is the track that got released beforehand, Laugh Now, Cry Later, but I'd rather just go into the beginning of the track, UnVEil featuring Sudi. It's this multi-genre, multi-instrumental beat that just kind of drags out just instrumentally in the beginning of it until Black Milk's voice actually comes into rapping, and when it does, it's just so luscious, like he just floats on top of this instrumental with complete ease. And how it just cuts into Sudi's vocals at the end. Oh my god. I mean, it's just fantastic. I don't know what to say. Because of that, I kind of expected him to go in the same direction. I mean, it was working, so why not? But the next track, But Can I Be, featuring Ab, is just completely different. Like, it's more groovy, it's more rappy, I guess, if you can call it that. Which is interesting, since these kinds of tracks are usually where Black Milk falters, since they rely on his rapping and flow, but he just blows me away with how he lets both his voice and the instrumentals speak, with these loud guitars in the beat that constantly stop and make it seem a bit choppy, but then there comes these beautiful melodic parts where there's almost like a choir, and then it just completely goes back to the beat again and the rapping. I love that. I love how he switches it up constantly. It never gets boring. And it's just an amazing track. I just heavily encourage you to check it out along with this entire album. Laugh Now, Cry Later is the 5th track on the album, and it's probably the most hyped since it was released with a music video before the album release. It's very obvious criticism to social media and how a lot of issues get trivialized because of how much information we consume. And yeah, at times I could feel like it was a bit too woke, and it was a bit too judgmental and preachy, I guess.
Wake up, my brother!
But that's just really minor in contrast to how amazing this track is. I love the African or South American drums that just kind of beat around in like the background of it. You don't even notice it until you listen to it a couple of times. And I love how wacky it feels with the synths or whatever it is that just kind of completely go in different directions all the time, like during this entire track, which just keeps it so interesting and so fresh. And then Black Milk comes in rapping these kind of woke, clever lines here and there that really give the track so much. And I love how he just doesn't float on top of this track. He just kind of keeps the flow very burst-like, which really just gives the instrumental so much space that it truly deserves. To be honest, I didn't expect Black Milk to continue going a political direction after Laugh Now, Cry Later, but I guess I was proven wrong on this new track here, or this other track here, I guess, True Lies, which is just filled with political statements about growing up in the ghetto of America, or religion, and I guess human vices in a way, with this addicting sample, or just, I don't know what it is actually, but this addicting kind of mumbling in the back of the bridge and hook. After that half, I feel like there's a change in tempo and sound with the abstract instrumental Eve. It's really short, so it's not really that much of a bother, and I wouldn't say that it's a low point of this album. I actually think it's a very clever way to show the change of sound and kind of get people thinking about it more. And even though the change can feel a bit subtle, I still think the first is better than the second half, since I think he's going back to his vices a little bit in the second half. The songs are very wordy, which hasn't always been a strong point, as I've said numerous times in this review, but I genuinely think Black Milk does a great job at the second half, especially with songs like Faux Friend, which I feel like if it was made a couple of years ago wouldn't have been nearly as good. It feels like a very old school G-Funk beat, and a very typical style of storytelling from that genre as well. And this shows up on a lot of songs of this half. Another example could be Drowned, that tackles a lot of social issues like police brutality and racism. But I think Faux Friend definitely left a bigger impression on me, just because of how little I anticipated him being able to pull something like that off. But I really gotta give it to him. This project is just so solid and a breath of fresh air. And even though Faux Friend shows his capabilities a bit clearer, he pulls the same stuff off perfectly in tracks like True Lies, But Can I, and Drown. So yeah, to summarize it in a score, I'd say about 9 out of 10. This is truly fantastic.